Welcome back to Made Up of Wires. We have been decompiling Castlevania Symphony of the Night for the last several months, and that's what we're going to continue doing today. If you're not familiar with the Castlevania Symphony of the Night decompilation project, go to soten.z.dev, where you'll find a link to the GitHub repo that has all the code that has been decompiled so far. You'll find progress on the overlays that we've been working on, and a link to the Discord server, which you'll find us chatting about the project, decompilation, PlayStation, and Soten internals, and lots of other things. I do want to call something out at the beginning here. I've said this before, and I want to make sure that it's well understood by everybody watching here and on YouTube. This is not my project. I am a contributor to the project, and if you're interested in decompilation and you are more technically minded, or like reading code, or understand MIPS assembly, you don't necessarily have to understand MIPS assembly to contribute, but you can be a contributor as well. Currently, there's about 38 contributors to this project. I'm one of many. This is my GitHub profile right here. Of course, it wouldn't be a stream if something didn't go terribly wrong. 1 second while I fix my... let's see if this will work now. There we go. There's GitHub. I went to soten.z.dev. I clicked on the source code link at the top and got to the GitHub repo. There are 38 other contributors to this. I'm one of many. I may or may not be near... I'd say I'm probably a top 10 contributor. But certainly there are many more people who have contributed more than me. People have been contributing to this project longer than I am. Zynamo is the person who started the project. Sozu and Biz Murphy are major contributors as well. And there's many, many more. Some of them appear on Twitch chat, and you can appear on Twitch chat as well, Monday through Thursday at noon Pacific time if you want to see more. So that's a little disclaimer. I'm just a contributor to the project. I thought one day, would people be interested in watching decompilation live and going on this journey with me? And it turns out that many of you are, so here we are today. So go to soten.z.dev for more info. I don't control this page either. Every once in a while, I'll add a new overlay and add a graph to the page, but ultimately, Zynamo is the one who's in charge of this. Okay, so we were working on the Sword Familiar, and I have some changes still, and I'm going to start there. What I've been doing is we spent, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 weeks working on the Sword Familiar, and while that was going on, most days we'd end with at least one compiled function or reasonably close to a compiled function. But I wasn't submitting those back as pull requests in GitHub. So I have a bunch of code still that is outstanding there, and I've just kind of been piecing them in logical chunks. I believe one of the related changes that I made, which was how the PSP version of the game calls what were previously PlayStation 1 inline assembly macros. I added some declarations. So the PSP, instead of using inline assembly for those, declares them as functions and calls them as functions. So I added declarations for those with function signatures that match the PlayStation 1 documentation. That change just recently was merged, I believe. So I want to check that and maybe rebase this. And this window is not working either. Give me 1 second while I while I fix this window as well. Sometimes I think OBS is gonna be kind to me. I should know better. There we go. We should be good. If you're a longtime viewer of the stream, you also know that there has been some internet problems here, so I apologize in advance if that affects the stream at all today. All right, so I'm going to pull the latest from upstream, and I use TIG. I like to use TIG to see what the history is. And yes, so this is my change for the PSP symbols. It was just adding, like I said, adding these declarations for what the PS1 treats as macros, and then any place those were used in existing PSP code, making sure that those symbols were correct. Let me see what this branch looks like. I have a bunch of code here that hasn't been checked in yet to the N01 branch. I'm going to skip that for now and basically pay myself into the same corner with N01, where I'm not submitting back as frequently as I should. All right, so yesterday we were working on this OF4 function. So this was a function that's called when you activate the elevator in the outer wall. My guess is that this is related to the text that's being drawn. I'm going to do two things today. I'm going to go through one more time and do a basic cleanup. And then I'm going to find the PSP version of this and pull that. And the PSP version is just nice to use for comparison as I'm going through. So if you are watching on YouTube, the Twitch people are seeing an ad right now, but you get all the bonus content, but you don't get to chat with us every day. What bonus content is that? Just me blabbing on about decompiling Symphony of the Night. That's what. If you do want more content, you can go to twitch.tv/madeofwires and click follow. On YouTube, you can subscribe. Those are both free options. And if you want and are interested, if you have a Prime sub, that helps. Helps the channel acquire the tools necessary to continue this process. So I'm going through here, and what I want to find, there's a couple of these go-tos, and go-tos can be one of two things when looking at the PlayStation version. So if you're new to SOT and Decomp, we have several versions of the game. There are, I believe, 3 distinct compilations. There's several different sub-compilations within each of those. But for the PlayStation era of games, so all the demos, the JP, US, EU version of the game, those are all going to be compiled with GCC and with optimization enabled. Then you have the Xbox version of the game for Xbox Live Arcade that was compiled, I believe, with Microsoft Visual C with a compatibility layer for achievements. And my hypothesis right now, and I'm going to do some research on this, is that this is the point where Konami decided that they are going to basically implement the PlayStation API as their own library, as a compatibility layer for the PlayStation. But all the code is recompiled. And then you have the PSP version, which is compiled using MetroWorks. And again, my guess is that they took the code that they had for the Xbox version PlayStation 1 compatibility layer and expanded that for the PSP. PSP has all the PlayStation 1 hardware, but it's a different SDK, and it exposes different things when you're in PSP mode as opposed to, well, I don't know if it's a different mode, but things are different when targeting the PSP SDK. And then every version subsequent, Mobile and Requiem, has been based on that pre-compiled PSP version, now adding a MIPS emulator on top of it. All right, so I'm going through. What I want to do is anywhere there's variables that I can get rid of. So in this case, this temp v1, I want to try to replace those with possibly what they're referencing. So in this case, it's the step. When we look at the PSP version, we'll be able to tell if that is a separate variable or if it's referencing that directly. These are kind of funny the way that they're written. So if the step is not equal to 2, and if the step is not equal to 3, this looks like it could be a switch. I was mentioning blocks before, or the go-tos. So on the GCC version, and that's the reason I talked about the compilers, on the GCC version, block 19 may be duplicated code. It may be a go-to. We don't know, and the PSP version will help us decide that. So I'm just looking to see if any of this is obviously duplicated. There's these stack pointer variables that M2C, which it did a mechanical decompile, an automated decompile, it doesn't know anything about. Here we have an increment. Any of these related to the stack pointer are likely wrong. And where we left yesterday, I was cleaning up a lot of this RGB assignments. When these are assigned to the same thing, usually that means that these assignments are all inline, and when for the quads, when later vertices are assigned, that also usually means that those are part of the same inline assignment. GCC will move things out of order as well. So seeing all of these RGB values get set, and then priority and draw mode in between, usually that means that those are out of order, but not always. The how close we are to matching somewhat confirms that that's the case as well. You have to assume that the people who wrote this originally, maybe you don't have to, but I liked to assume that the people who wrote this originally were reasonable humans and were doing things very similarly to how we might do them today. I'll get rid of the type summary. In other cases, you look at what you have to, the hoops that you have to jump to get matching code, and you think that the people who are doing this must have been crazy. Here's this temp S0. This is missing. It's not being assigned anywhere. That could be, oh, it is being assigned way up here to a stack pointer value. We'll have to come back and see what that might have been. Usually I like taking this M2C version, seeing how close I can get that to matching, just by cleaning it up into logical ordering. And then I'll go back and see where the where there might be differences with the assembly. Because the GCC version is optimized, you could spend a lot of time trying to match instructions exactly up front. And then the optimizer kicks in and all your work is worthless. So usually this, especially on these larger like business logic type methods, usually this ordering works out. Not always. Sometimes along the way you destroy some subtlety. So we're getting a little closer, 62%. Still a lot that's missing. Here's one hint. Here on 91, we have a bunch of code on line 91 that just doesn't exist over here. And my guess is that's going to, excuse me, if we look at what that is, so a bunch of these function calls, we're going to find that over here somewhere else, not in the order that was expected. And I don't see an obvious place for it. And it's possible that this was already, that this was duplicated in some other way. All right, so what I'm going to do now is try to find a unique constant value. And that's how I find the PSP version. So this hex C5 or C7, those are relatively unique, and or this color lookup table 19F, C8. The priorities are unique because this is going to dictate the ordering that the sprites are drawn on the screen. So when the sprites overlap, what is going to come in front of another. I'll try the color lookup table first because it has more entropy. And then I'll go for the priority if this doesn't work. So I'm looking for hex 09F in the PSP version. And this is an 01. Nothing's going matching here yet. And why don't I? Oh. Oh, I don't have this exported yet, so let's export this. Do I have config for this? I don't. So we have a tool that I think Dynamo and yeah, primarily Dynamo built for automatically extracting config, building a splat config. Splat is what's used to take the binaries from the disk and split them into components, including data and code. So our version is the PSP version, and I'm looking at N01. And so this will look at a lot of similarities that exist between them. And that should be enough to find this. And yes, they're across two different functions. So between these two, I'm going to add a search for the hex C8 as well. And that gives me one. Just this CBO function. So in decomp.me, I'm going to create a new scratch. I'm going to save this one. This will be for the PSP. There's one change to primitive data structure that needs to be made, and we're dealing with primitives in this, which is an additional 32-bit field that comes at the end of the next pointer. And interestingly, this has calls to several of them. Oh, interesting. This has calls to several of the macros that I just worked on mapping. Those macros maybe this isn't the right function. Those macros are used for low-level drawing. There's two things that might be happening. Either those priorities weren't unique enough. And so what I'm going to look for here is, for example, allocate primitives. This is also playing a sound effect. I guess there's a couple things that might be different. This may be legitimately different between the two games. And or I found the wrong function. I'm going to go with found the wrong function in this case. And look at the other one. So I'm going to create a new scratch in decomp.me. I'm going to delete. Should I delete this one? Yeah, I will. So this plays a sound effect in that function, which is another tell that it's not the same. I'm not quite sure though. We'll look at this one and see if it looks any closer. Make sure my dummy is still there. So I want to see if the general structure of this function is the same. It doesn't necessarily look like that's the case. There is a bunch of these primitive setups. The cases are quite a bit different though. So it's possible here that we don't have a good analog for in the PSP version, or I just haven't found the right place yet. So let me do a little more searching and see what there might be. So the values that I chose were based on the color lookup table. I'm not sure if the color lookup tables are the same between games. So maybe that was a bad value to choose. The other was what was that? C8 was the priority. So maybe I'll go backwards and look at the priority first. And then see if there's any other values that I can get from that. So I'm going to get rid of this search for C8. There's only a few functions that have that value, so that's pretty nice. Filter. And maybe one of the color values, so or positions. So this one is being set to B8. I'm going to skip. Yeah, position should be fine. So let's look at B8. Oh, that is not what I wanted. Because I'm getting all of these words, and I tried this. That's coming up as data, so let's try a comma. Okay, that's not a good one then. Let's look for let's look for 18. Of course, that's another prefix for addresses as well. I'm going to get rid of the data directory. So this gets us back to that same B0 function. which was the other, not the one that I, no, B0 might be different. Let me see how often this hex 18 is used. It's used quite a bit. Let's see. Xrags. That's an old Unix cleaning implement, an Xrag. I don't like these choices. Oh, let's try C4. Again, 2 functions. I have C4 being used in 2 different places. So our original PlayStation version of the function did not have a switch in it. But it looks like it could have. So in this case, C4 is being added to the stack pointer. So that doesn't seem like the right thing. In this one, it's also an offset from the stack pointer. So not what I'm looking for. Okay, so the next unique value I'm going to look for is there was a draw mode. So 35 for the draw mode is reasonably unique. And let's see if there's another draw mode. 55. Okay, that is 2 choices again. Oh, so this is an interesting. So this is just storing a bunch of values at different external offsets. So that's not what we're looking for at all. And this is storing a value at offset 36. And let's look at so offset 36 is going to be draw mode on the PSP. It's offset 32 on the PlayStation. So this maybe it. Let's see. And this might be something that we started with. And delete this one and start a new one. So if you're just joining, okay, so this was the first function I pulled and the one I originally thought it was. So there's a few issues here that may make this less helpful than most functions. So it appears that this implementation might be quite a bit different. We can get some ideas, though, of the structure of this, of our other function, but it's possible that these are two very different implementations. So again, kind of reiterating if you're just tuning in, this was, I believe, the function that's being called when you activate the elevator in the outer wall and the text appears. It appears that the PSP version may just be implemented very differently from the PlayStation version. There certainly are some very unique differences here. Offsets of 10,000 hex on a value. This looks like it's a pointer that was inverted. Very unique. So what I might do is try to integrate this, the outer state machine, this switch, with the original. I want to see if arg1 is being used. And it is. The M2C didn't pick up on an arg1 originally. So let's do that. Let's go and find who's calling this function, and we can decompile that and then see if our function signature is correct here. So A2 is being used. Let's see if A1 is. There aren't any uses of A1 left here. So I expect one of two things. Either this function is in a list of entities, and that how the function is called is by the main game engine. Some other code is going to say, give me entity, whatever the thing is to show the switch text. Create that entity, and then the game engine will keep track of that entity from that point forward and call this function every time it needs to redraw. And we won't see this function being called directly in the outer wall code. It'll just be called as part of the structure that's created. So that's one possibility. The other possibility is that this is a helper function that's being called by a different entity, and then we will see those function calls in N01, and we don't see it. And so my assumption then is that this is the main driver for an entity, and what we'll see instead for N01 is hey Project Omega, hey Eldridge, good to have you, is that this will be in the N01 data. And right at the front, it should be in one of the very first structures, which tells us that it is in fact an entity. And it's already been given the symbol name entity updates. It's an eldritch invasion. I I know that it wasn't intended that you post your connection score, but I used to be very big on the playing connections. And somehow fell out of it. My son and my wife and I would play every day. Thanks for the raid. Appreciate everybody showing up. All right, so we have a function here that is an entity function. We don't have any callers, but that does tell us that the function signature should be just an entity. The main game engine doesn't pass anything into the functions other than the entity object. So then this PSP version, which I think is a PSP analog to this, it should be the same thing. It shouldn't be called from other code. And it don't I have there's one thing that I did incorrectly for the PlayStation version, but I'll do that in a second. So what I expect though is that this is referenced only from the data segment, and that is what we see. And I would expect that make config will maybe it won't. I expect it to give it a symbol name. We see many more symbols. Eldritch, since you're on the line, I'll address your comment in a second. Is the outer wall significantly different on the PSP version from the PlayStation version? Do you happen to know? So Eldritch's comment that I was laughing at is he played Soten for 9 hours the other day to get a 200% and see what RAM wasn't being used. If you're willing to share, or I don't know if you're going to publish this later, but how much RAM is available? I have been wondering. So I've been playing Prince of Persia, Lost Crown, and it definitely appears that nearby stages aren't necessarily unloaded, and having dynamic allocation instead of the fixed allocation that Soten uses seems like it would go a long way to fixing that. Okay, so Eldridge is saying there's no map tile differences, but definitely possible. Yeah, and maybe I misspoke or used terminology that we use on decomp that isn't really used. Entities we talk about as like things that have some kind of state and change over time. So enemies, the switch is likely an entity, the elevator, things like that. Not necessarily map tiles. Okay, so and the reason I'm asking is because it seems like the list of entities for the PSP is significantly longer than the list for the PlayStation 1. So Eldritch is saying there's weather that can be controlled by entity. Is that any different between the two games? The next thing I'm going to do is just look at the offsets between those two. That'll tell me something as well. So on the PSP side, we're at 3DC, 3C. And this starts at 3D BAO. Oh, actually, yeah, we'll keep going down that train of thought. So it's entity 27, or would be. And on the PlayStation side, nine three four. Oh, this is entity 5D. So maybe those aren't the same. Hey, Ton Broads Roll, good to have you here, coming from Hacker News. Let me look at one more thing. This gives us a little hint. So if the entities are in the same position, which I'm trying to remember if I've looked at that in any of the stages. Yeah, it looks like they are. So this would, well, it is the same number of entities, so I was wrong about that. It looks like this this last entry on the list, this 148, may be a better candidate. So let's look at that one. It didn't have a lot of the other unique values that I was looking for, but the position in this list is better. Let's see. It's much too short though to be this. If you're just tuning in, we're working on outer wall. So this function is, I believe, is used for the text that says elevator activated. And actually, I should have realized this earlier. The way that text is rendered and the translations are done on the PSP is very different from the PlayStation, the US PlayStation version of the game. So we're looking at the EU PSP version of the game versus the US PlayStation version of the game. Did I say PSP? EU PSP. So there are going to be differences. That doesn't mean that the state machine and the switch that drives that is wrong, but it may mean that the implementation is different enough that it's not helpful for trying to decompile the PlayStation version. So there's a bunch of issues, and apologies if disconnecting. Of course, disconnecting in the middle of this, but the M2C couldn't figure out necessarily what the correct arguments should be for this function, what their types are. So I'm going to give it a little help and see if we can get this a little closer. There's a bunch of function declarations that we can provide as well. And maybe that will get us something that looks a little more familiar. All right, is that reconnected? Yeah, it looks like it's reconnected. Thank you for putting up with my crappy internet. So any of the GTE functions came from macros on the PlayStation. So what Konami did was they built out a PlayStation 1 compatibility layer, and all of the GTE macros, which were in that inline assembly, they converted to functions, which then translate to the PSP SDK. Hey, Dig Down Deep, good to have you back. Dig Down Deep, well aware of the streaming and connection issues. So what I need to do is grab these function signatures, and those are going to be on or in the libgte header. And I'm just going to grab this whole bunch. Some of these others I don't know yet. Let's see. So I'm going to move those back. But with this updated set, along with the updated function signature here, the decompiler might be able to figure out a bunch of these new ones. And I'm not sure why. I thought I had. I see. Anything that is defined for the GTE prefix, we got to get rid of that as well. That's part of the context creation process. And this set transformation matrix function, I'm going to go grab. So that's in a file called libref PDF that came with the PlayStation SDK. So I look at that to figure out what the signature for those are. And I'll show you what that looks like as well. The documentation for PlayStation is, I think, pretty good. So it gives a kind of a CANR style declaration for that function. And for the most part, these are all void. And I'm going to keep looking for this. Any of the pound define GTE macros, I'm going to just get rid of them all. And so we still have a bunch that we don't know about. I should go through and fix these warnings as well. Those tend to bother me, and people are usually thankful when they get fixed. What is... Not sure what M2C is, or not M2C, MetroWorks is complaining about here. Apparently it doesn't like having void in the argument field, but that it compiles. So I'm not sure what's causing that. All right, so that function RTBS sign being called. All right, so now we have to figure out what some of these other functions are. Sometimes we can infer, sometimes it's not as easy to infer. Cases like this where there's a constant, I'm going to assume that it's an integer. That may not be right. And when there's no return value, or no return value being used, I'm going to assume that it's a void return. Those may or may not be correct, but if there's no other evidence to go on, I'd like to clean it up as quickly as possible. So we have a type here. We don't know what that type is. Hey, Nate the Great. I mentioned you yesterday. I almost caught your stream and was, I don't know, sometime too late. By the time I tuned into your stream yesterday, you were already gone. So I'm going to assume that that's a sign 32 as well. These might not be correct. They might be other things, but I find it easier to get this compiling and then deal with the types later. And actually, I think I'm just going to go through and make all these void. Getting kicked off of M2C usually is a sign that stream is going to drop soon too, so apologies to, or not M2C, off decomp.me. So apologies if the stream does drop. Management has been notified and we're working on it. I mentioned, and obviously, a lot of the people come every day and chat. And so I've mentioned in the past how terrible my internet is. When I asked to get converted to fiber, there was work that I had to do in the house because I wanted the drop in an interior room, and I knew that they weren't going to make that easy for me, so I did all the cabling and ran fish tape and basically made it super simple so that they could come in and just drop the line to the side of the house, and I would pull the rest. But it was a fair amount of work to do, and I called to get it scheduled, and basically they said, okay, we'll come out the next day and do it. And I wasn't ready, and I knew it was going to take a couple days, so I pushed it out to yesterday. And it did take me most of the weekend to finish everything up. Let's see where we have. So we're going to have a bunch of types that don't match now. I'm okay with that. So especially with the voids, that's fine as well. Well, they came out yesterday though, and couldn't install it. The dropout side wasn't done, and I wanted them to run the interior cabling, and they wouldn't do it. So this stack pointer E0 appears to always be referring to arg0. I'm not sure why arg0 would be on the stack here, but it appears to be. It may be due to other register pressure that's happening. This, if I didn't get that. So I'm going to get rid of the stack pointer E0. It's a relatively large stack frame for this function. And I am wondering if this is worth it. Because this PSP function is quite a bit different, is it worth doing all this work? Maybe. We'll see. Is it worth decompiling at all? Yes, it is. All right, so what is next? Quite a bit. So there is a prototype mismatch. We have a bunch of these variables getting introduced for various locations on the stack, which is fine. We went through this dance with the primitives. And this actually looks very familiar. And does kind of show what may be missing from the PlayStation version. So this is one of the nice things about the PSP. So we have this going up, 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 up. Case 3. When we get to case 3, the first thing we do is a loop where we're setting some extension field. And then setting our color lookup table. Color lookup table is one of the things that I was assuming was going to be the same, but appears not to be. And so let's look for this. So we're setting U1 to 7F, UV 7F and 80. I'm not sure if the coordinates are going to be the same between the two. It doesn't look like it. But this does look like possibly where this case 3 is. So we're grabbing the primitive from the entity that's passed in. In this case, there's a loop that doesn't exist, another loop that doesn't exist, a third loop that doesn't exist, so maybe this isn't the same. it's not till way down here that we get to something that looks similar. Texture page is E. Lookup table is 44. Those appear different as well. Many more function calls happening here compared to the PlayStation version. We do have our draw mode, which is what got us to this to begin with. Draw mode being set only to the 35 and 55 values. So draw mode is a set of flags. And we can look at what those are. So 55 would be colors, transparent, unknown, and texture page. Yeah, unfortunately, I don't think the PSP version is going to be as much help as I had hoped. So let's go back to the original. So it does suggest to me, though, that this should be structured as a switch rather than a set of condition statements. So I'm going to go through and just kind of comment these out, or comment each of these, and try to figure out what order these should be in. So this is step equal to 1. And who else is referring to this? Some code up here. So this, if it's not equal to 1 but less than 2, that would have to be 0. But almost immediately we have this does not equal 0 condition, which doesn't seem like it could be hit. But let's assume that that is a thing. We're going to block 19. That's the case. Block 19 is way down here. Not making any judgment yet as to what that might be. And we should have initialized entity mapped in the PSP side. No, not the case. Allocate primitives should, but primitives are used for drawing, and so they're going to be a little different between the two versions of the game. Interestingly, this allocates 25 versus the 32 that are allocated on the PlayStation side. So possibly an optimization. So I do think that this, and we could look to see in the assembly whether this exists or not. So this check is being done. This check wasn't part of the original. Step 0, given one of these state machines, is likely doing this to initialize entity and all this. So I am going to make the assumption that this block here is case 0 in a switch statement, and start trying to reorganize this. And if this is case 0, it also falls nicely into a fall through to this block 13. So this probably is just how GCC optimized it. And I can get rid of these comments then. So all of this can go away. And I think this can go away now as well. And so what we're left with is, if basically case 2 is going to jump to block 19. I think. And what are our other choices? Case 2 looks like maybe it just breaks. So then the rest of this is case 3. Something will have to make sure that this block 19 gets filled in correctly. I guess case 2 technically is go to block 19. And I think case 4 is also go to block 19. And what is block 14? Where does that leave us? I guess default? All right, so that okay, so now it's yelling at me about block 18 and 19 being used but not defined, because I must have something else. Oh, I have an extra close parens. That should fix that, and that's actually quite a bit closer. So now I'm going to go through this. There's some logic happening at the beginning that is not not correct, but I'm going to look at how this this switch is flowing and try to get an idea of whether or not that looks correct. The fiber install can't come soon enough. Hey Arkham, good to have you back. So one concern here is that adding this case, or adding the switch statement, is introducing RO data, and the RO data isn't present in the original that I could tell. Happy New Year, Orcam. Do you take any time off? Have a good break? I'm going to look for this destroy entity function call and see where that is. A lot of this at the bottom looks like it's fine, or mostly fine. Not seeing these destroy entity calls though. On the left side. Oh, here they are. So there definitely still is some ordering issues going on. Let's look here for this call to 1090. Okay, so case 3 may be this set of calls down here. Block 14 was missing. I lost it somewhere along the way. Sometimes reorganizing can cause more problems. Oh, that's good to hear, Orcam. Yeah, it's always surprising, I think, when we just stayed at home. The kids had a couple weeks off, and the days and days go by, and yeah, you might check email, but other than that, it's not really used. So what I'm gonna do, I think I am gonna go back to the top here. This is somewhat interesting. It's a little this is a little trickier than I expected it to be. Hey, I negotiate with terrorists. I don't know if that's going to get my video flagged or not, but nice to have you on the stream for the first time. So someone who negotiates with terrorists is asking, have we messed with AI for disassembling yet? There have been others that are on the project that have looked at it. Specifically, I think Copilot on the GitHub repo. I've not looked at it personally. there are there's some legal reasons that I don't necessarily want to look at it. That may or may other people may or may not feel the same way about. My current superstition related to reverse engineering and decompilation law is that what we're doing is a creative endeavor, and so if we're if this is a creative, and the thing that makes our reverse engineering legal and our decompilation legal is that this is a unique creative work. If we introduce AI and have machines doing most of the work, is that still a creative endeavor? And if not, then are we violating copyright by, using a pure machine translation to do this? I don't know. Then on top of that, my interest primarily is the puzzle solving, the enjoyment of figuring out these details, seeing how the compilers work and things like that. So that also, to a certain extent, keeps me away from it. Are those valid reasons? I don't know. There's a few things that I'm also stubborn about, stupidly so. And one of those is probably like LLMs and AI. So I was just cleaning up some stuff above. What I see here with a lot of these stack pointer variables, these likely were the constants down below. And so I'm gonna start getting rid of those. The one constant that I don't remember seeing though is this 180. Yeah, there's certain things that I feel relatively stubborn about and or just don't get, and and so I stay away from it. LLMs is one of them. It is extremely impressive, but I don't know. I'm not. It's not necessarily my wheelhouse. So I think that one of these may or may not be the t-page variable. I could use AI right now. I could use some real intelligence at the moment. Yeah, there are a bunch of variables here that are just so M2C, when it was doing this initial decomp, it knows that they exist. It knows that these registers are getting set to different values, but then can't figure out how or why. And so that becomes our job. This one I thought this was going to be a reasonably straightforward day for decomp, but it's not. So down here, we actually, starting around line 199 with all these assignments, these are mostly fine. I am going to go through, and I think what is missing is ordering for a lot of these. So I'm going to work on fixing the ordering. And hopefully that is all that is necessary to fix these. And this is going to end up with a bunch of bunch of cases where I'm moving lines around and then those lines don't necessarily the changes don't get aggregated, and so the compiler yells. In this case, so we have these globals. They're being loaded and subtracted. That ordering seems fine. What this shift by 1F is, so we're just taking the sign. So we're shifting by 31. But then we're shifting that out as well. And that doesn't seem right. This may be overflow logic for the byte. So one of these values is a byte. Let's see, our load byte is coming from A2, Ain't it the Great? um, 193. We're storing bytes when what's expected is that we're storing halves or 16-bit values. So I think what's happening is that the X and Y and U and V are backwards. Let's see if that changes anything. I wrote something else earlier on. I have too many friends. So the X and Y values are 16 bits. I didn't think that U and V were only. No, that's not right. I didn't think that they were bytes. Oh, is it the colors? It might be the colors. No, the colors seem correct. It appears that this addition of the 40 is happening earlier. Stored into V0. This looks like it's happening. Unfortunately, only the assignment here is being attributed to this line. Not sure where things went wrong. Usually the ordering of this is getting the doing the XY values in order, followed by UV. But that doesn't seem to be the case here. There's no reason that UV would have to be set after XY. Just that is what is most likely. And I still think that this and okay, so this may be the hint that's necessary. So this is shift right arithmetic versus shift right logical. Shift right logical is the bit shift operator that you're probably familiar with if you've done any bitwise programming. Shift right arithmetic I don't think would be a divide by 2. And this shift here by 31 again, I think it has to do with the sign and overflow. I'm going to try to just get rid of it all and see if see what that looks like if the overflow is dealt with. Okay, it is. So we're taking the difference and adding it back. But it seems like with a min of 0. And this kind of tells that tale. So I think it's the same expression down here, and the rest of that logic is is just in place for dealing with the overflow, and it's not something that we necessarily see. So there's going to be several more of this. Interestingly enough, that got caught up here. And so then continuing down, I'm going to try to group these. Where this addition is happening may be the culprit for this ordering. So this V0 is the result of the division at this point, and so that's when this is being done. However, what's happened is we've already done this work. So I'm not sure what is going on. So whatever A2 is, that value is getting, the first field of that is getting loaded and then added to 40, or 40 is being added to it, as opposed to it being added to the result of this expression. So it does just seem to be an ordering issue. Why it seems to be working fine up here. Oh, it doesn't. How about that? Up here, what may be happening is that these are out of order. And this actually might all be one long chain. Yeah, I'm gonna assume that that's the case. Some of these end up being out of order, so not quite. I may have been right the first time. Or not. So it seems like B0 and B2 are being set together, and then B1 and B3 are being set together, if I'm reading that right. And then there's some issues with the registers that I'm not too worried about. The assignments are correct now. So this has the same issue, but I think that's where I'm going to leave it today. Just a little progress made today, not as much as I had hoped. And we don't get the cheater version to help us this time. But that's okay. We'll figure it out. And it's nice to have these tough ones every once in a while. I do think I might do one thing. 145. I might do one thing here before going. So one of the things that I thought was that this was going to be a switch and not a different branches using conditionals. I'm going to try to rewrite it as a branching conditionals and see if what that changes. This is a little tricky because I still want the fall through here. Yeah, I'm not sure that I like this any better. Yeah, I'm going to back that out as well. So it, yeah, I don't necessarily like how the conditional logic was looking. However, there is evidence that this is not a switch, or if it is a switch, it's a much simpler switch than I have so far. But we'll come back to that in a little bit. 62, 68. Here I'm seeing this as these appear to be out of order. So every time, it seems like every time type is set. That's one of the nice things about how this code is written in general, is it does seem to be consistent, mostly. All right, so you've been watching Made Up of Wires, and we have been decompiling Castlevania Symphony of the Night. Go to soten.z.dev to learn more about the Castlevania Symphony of the Night decompilation project. There's a really great graphic, and I'm guessing Zynamo made the graphic for the Symphony of the Night decompilation project. I think I have it somewhere in my OBS. Is this it? Yeah, there we go. Look at that logo. That's so good. This this asset, and I don't know if it was pulled because of it being too similar to a game logo that you might be familiar with. This is hidden somewhere on one of the GitHub pages, and when my browser generates a thumbnail, this is the image that I get. And so I had to go searching long and hard to find where this was. I don't see it referenced anywhere else, either on soten.z.dev or anywhere, but it's such a great logo. And maybe one day we'll make t-shirts and this will be on the t-shirt. But that's what we're doing. This is the Made Up of Wires. We're decompiling Castlevania Symphony of the Night, working on the outer wall, running into some issues with the elevator activated text function. I'll be back tomorrow at 11 a.m. Pacific time. Time zones, so hard. Welcome to 2025. I hope everybody had a great New Year, Merry Christmas, and we'll be back tomorrow. And if say it one more time, in case you weren't here yesterday, I'm going to be at the Game On Expo in April in the Phoenix metro area. Talking about what else? Soten Decomp. We'll see where we are in a couple months. But if there's anything that you think should be part of that talk, please comment. Don't forget to like, subscribe, thumbs up, thumbs down, do all the things. And that's all I got for you. See you tomorrow.